This is a discussion I have a lot with coaches, the impact that culture and the environment can have. And you could have the best program design, but if you have culture, it doesn't matter.
1 in 10,000 or whatever can slapdick their way to like national championships. I've known those people, but for the most part, if you have a rigid enough culture, you can make up for quite a bit. It's not just the programming that, oh, I'm doing the right things at the right time. It's your mindset so that at every single touch, you're getting that extra sense of urgency, and you can't like recreate that on your own.
Why does the 18-year-old who can front squat 500 plus for reps, why is he that strong now? Because we just front squat and back squat, and we do the boring over and over and over again. If you reframe it from suffering to boring, it's like, oh, okay.
You open social media, we love watching old Larry Wheels videos. We love watching people bleed out of their face and go crazy. You know, Chuck Vogelpohl about to get under a squat. We love seeing this. Our entire world, all the technology we have, all the abundance we take for granted, it develops on the back of people just doing their day job. More world champions have been built off punch the clock workouts than monumental efforts, which...
We're going to go into the dark depths of the strength world with Alexander Bromley, and we're going to start right now. I sat down with Alexander Bromley in a unique setting where we were able to go through a bunch of different factors around what's happening in the strength world, how to get stronger, how to be more effective, how to have the best time in the gym so that we have best exercise selection. We can improve our strength. We can maintain positive health and be mentally happy when we're actually training. And on the back end of this podcast, we go deep into talking shop. I'm not going to share what we get into. I want you guys to listen and comment. Let us know what you think. And we're going to get into this podcast with Alexander Bromley. Who's the hammer guy on the back wall?
So that's George Friend. I went down a rabbit hole. I was covering like World's Strongest Man, and I went over like the first World's Strongest Man, and I had already been down a Westside rabbit hole about like the OG Culver City Westside that he was a part of, that Louie borrowed all of his methods and the name from. But George Friend is, I keep meaning to do a video on him because he was a stud and like they were all characters. But he was I think he had a world record for a minute in hammer.
What happened? So tell me about Louie and Westside.
So
let's just fucking start the podcast. Fuck it.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, man. No playing just a tip. Let's just go right in. Man, I'm covering. So I'm going to go over all of this like kind of off the top of my head because it's been probably a year since like Jamie Lewis, Plague of Strength. Awesome website, just not safe for work. So, you know, a lot of X-rated GIFs or GIFs, as they say, populated. However, the guy covers a lot of the stuff of like the annals of strength history. And he's a character, and like reading stuff that he puts out, there's a lot of good information. But he published an entire book. I want to say it's called Westside Connection, basically where he just details like the history of the Culver City Westside and the relationship to the Westside as we know it. So reading that, especially on the back end of all of the videos I've made, all of the research I've done, all of the reading I've done on Westside as we know it, and kind of pairing things together was interesting to say the least. But essentially the original Culver City Westside, I mean, the notable names are George Friend, who was over my shoulder. He was a world record. I believe he had a world record. I'm not exactly sure on the stats, but he was one of the best hammer throwers in the world for a period of time. And he ended up training in the Culver City Westside with Bill Peanuts West. I want to say Peanuts is a guy that came from Pennsylvania. I believe he had some brief affiliation. I don't know if it was York Barbell, but it was one of the notable gyms out there. He ended up coming over to the West Coast. They lived this very like bohemian, almost this hippie lifestyle, living in a, I don't know what you would call it. It was like kind of like a bordello, but with a bunch of beach dudes from Muscle Beach, and they were all put up by like this older woman who like kept them all fed and like so. I mean, it gets kind of wild, but it's like you would expect in like the 50s or 60s at Muscle Beach. Like I'm sure it was a big party, but they end up starting like the beginnings of powerlifting as we know it, because at the time, I mean, you had Olympic lifting, and then you had the other lifts were kind of like odd freak lifts. You know, you'd have these other contests nobody really recognized where they do, you know, a deadlift or a curl or whatever. And they had some weird kind of obscure old school, kind of like the beginnings of powerlifting. I want to say like the belly toss bench, you know, where you're lying on the floor and you roll it over your head and heave it up, you know. I don't know if you've seen that, but they do some crazy shit. So, you know, the nut jobs, the freaks that weren't bodybuilders and they weren't Olympic lifters, they started doing this, and these characters were at the forefront of it, and they ended up all training in Peanut's garage. Fren, I forget exactly how they met or came into the picture, but Fren had his history as a hammer thrower. Together they like made some of these just crazy innovations that were just based around trying to lift as much weight back in the Wild West when there were like no rules. They were making up the rules as they went. So people think that equipment came in like the 90s or whatever, but these guys like in the 60s were wrapping themselves with bed sheets to try to build compression, wrapping tennis balls behind their knees. They were, you know, doing all wearing like several shirts that were too small, constantly trying to find like a way to game the system, but they also innovated a lot of crazy shit. So they're credited with like creating the power rack with the spacing specifically so that you could do partials. They were arguably the first people to aggressively train different ranges of motion for the specific purpose of augmenting their lifts. They made box squats popular. One of the reasons that they did it was because a friend found that he could box squat more frequently without getting sore. And as somebody who has to train that skill on a regular basis, that's like a huge asset. I mean, I'm sure you know this, like all the athletes you train, it's not just, hey, how do I get these guys strong? What training program gets them strong? It's how can I train them regularly without interfering with the skill work that's much more important, because you can't put somebody through like a 30 set leg day and have them be sore as shit for the next 4 days. So, you know, being able to find things that allowed him to throw and train regularly without overtraining was big. And I believe, I don't know if they started using bands. I believe they used chains. I also, I'm a little rusty on this, but I also believe that originated in Culver City as well. And there's a funny story because George Fren, and one of the reasons I wanted to cover him, the guy was like a little bit out of his mind. He was a little out there. He was a joker. He liked to talk a lot of shit. So there's all these stories about him going to meets and running his mouth to like the other guys in like ways like they don't do it in sports now. You got to go to like a fringe sport like arm wrestling or something where they're just a bunch of degenerates that get drunk and just talk shit to each other. But there's this story. He had this rival and he went to watch him throw when he wasn't competing, and he sat in the stand with his dog. And he introduced his dog, and he said he named his dog after the guy. So through like the whole meet, he's like, come here, boy, come here. And he's calling it by name. And the guy thinks he's calling him, and he's calling his dog. And all of this like chirping going back and forth to like getting in people's heads. And the rumor was that he ended up like bullying that guy out of throwing, that he ended up taking a long break, and he credited Fren's relentless shit talking as part of the reason. He was in the first World's Strongest Man. Unfortunately, I think he got injured. He tore his bicep, but like everybody remembers like Lou Ferrigno and Franco Columbu like deadlifting the car at the first World's Strongest Man. They're doing it kind of like a hack lift, you know, where they're turned the other way. Well, Fren tries to deadlift it facing forward, tears his bicep, And there's this like long drawn out period where like Paul Anderson is coming up saying, you're out. Like, we can't let you lift anymore. And he's holding his arm and he's like pissed. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, let me back in. I can lift it. Like, he's visibly like, I don't care. I don't have a bicep. I'm going to lift that fucking car up. Just really interesting backstory. And then it all kind of comes full circle because the rumor has it that as Louie Simmons got more popular into the 90s, that he actually called Louie Simmons and said he owed him $5,000 for taking the name Westside Barbell and repurposing all of their methods and kind of selling them as his own. This is something Louie wrote about. This is in Louie's blog. He was like honored that George Friend called him to like heckle him about using his stuff. So anyways, it's a really interesting backstory. I'm not even doing it justice, just recounting off the top of my head. But that, in my opinion, and I was heavily influenced by Westside early on, at least as like kind of the cultural influence they were for lifters throughout like the early 2000s. But having covered all of that and then going back in time and seeing what they did, I think that's a much more interesting story. And I think that it's unfortunate that they aren't more well known in the space for the influence that they had.
Would you rather walk around feeling stiff trying to get under a barbell or feel more athletic like you used to back in high school? We want you guys to start training like an athlete because we believe that you will be able to lift heavier weights longer. Not only are you going to be able to lift heavier weights longer, but you're going to be healthier, which means that you're going to be around longer and you're going to be in the gym having a lot of fun. And that's why we have training plans to optimize your athletic fitness. Inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength, you can have access to these specific plans. All you have to do is click the first link in the description. Head over to peakstrength.app. The Google Play Store if you've got an Android, or the Apple iOS Store if you've got an iPhone. Download Peak Strength and then put in your email. Select that you guys want to train for athletic fitness. And the coolest part about training on athletic fitness is that you can select the specific path of that program. And it's going to be catered towards your goals and even towards what you have available in your gym. You can train for strength, hypertrophy, speed, explosiveness. You can even sprinkle in a little bit of endurance. And these are all things that we put together for you. And we want you to commit to yourself for 1 full year. Train as an athlete for a full year. And when you commit to yourself to train like an athlete for a full year, you're going to get 38% off. Click that first link. Go to peakstrength.app, download it, put in your email, select your goals inside of athletic fitness, get that 38% off. Let's start getting more mobile. Let's start getting more explosive. Let's continue to build that strength. Now, let's get back to Alexander Bromley.
So do you think Louie stole just the name or actually stole like the equipment and the use of bands and chains as well?
So I mean, I don't want to go throwing around the word stole. I mean, people use that all the time. I mean, everybody is influenced by everybody. Lord knows that like if I couldn't adopt ideas I came across when I was younger, I wouldn't be able to say anything about anything. So I mean, I say like, oh, he stole it, but he obviously took the name, and again, it's not a secret. He's mentioned the Culver City Westside guys, the lore of where they came from, what they did, and how that inspired Louie is all well known. He was never shy about it. But I mean, absolutely, that's where he got those lifts from. Like he popularized the box squat in the modern era, but I mean, he didn't invent that on his own. He was looking through the methodologies, the old magazines, and talking to people and seeing what they did. And the guys that came out of that field had just all kinds of things that had never been seen before, things that we kind of take for granted now. You wouldn't think that back in that era, if all you had was a regular barbell to lift and a rack to lift it out of, that you would actually think to do things like rack pulls and pin presses and changing grips and working the bench at different angles, and finding ways to hit heavier weights more often so that you're able to train more aggressively. So it really is innovative. And Friend, for being a hammer thrower, I want to say he had like a 2,100 pound total, I believe. And that's a guy that, I mean, hammer throwing was his main gig. Like he wasn't nobody was paying him to power lift. Nobody gave a shit that he was going into these meets. He did that almost as a side gig. And he didn't look it either. I mean, he's somewhat muscular, but he's kind of tall, kind of lanky. To put up a 2,100 pound total back in the era of the 60s, before powerlifting was technically a sport, 65, 66, as a side gig to throwing a hammer is pretty incredible.
Well, and think about too, in the hammer throw, you don't train your bench. There's no carryover of a bench press. So it's like, I was thinking, one, do you think, was he weightlifting at all, like snatching or cleaning? And then two, training under Dr. B, Bunderchuck, one of the things he told me when he was like 15 or 16, they had tested cleans and benches and stuff because they were trying to figure out which events kids should throw. Because he was still throwing discus and shot, and he cleaned 140 kilos, but he only bench pressed 90 kilos. So they were like, well, you're only bench pressing 200 pounds. So you're going to throw hammer. So putting that in perspective with the powerlifting aspect of the bench press is like, this dude's a freaking savage.
And he talked about that openly, that in fact, I believe there was somewhat of a de-emphasis on bench for concern that it might actually work against it, if your upper body gets too bound or something. But he had mentioned, there's at least one instance I recall where he had mentioned not taking it seriously as a hammer thrower because it was less important. And I believe his bench crawled into I want to say high fours. I'm not sure if he was over, he might have creeped over a 500-pound bench. But yeah, as somebody who has no use for that in their primary sport, it is crazy, and it makes you wonder if you take the talent from that era, dropped them today with a much more focused, serious plan, what would he have been capable of? He probably had the talent to do a lot more than he actually did.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's like, is it just straight up culture? And like, this is a discussion I have a lot with coaches, is like the impact that culture and the environment can have, and ultimately sometimes the coach and the setting could absolutely trump anything else. Like, you could have the best program design, but if you have culture, it doesn't matter. Let's say if you're coming from like an average program design, but you have high culture, what's your take on that?
I mean, it's all relevant, and I think it's hard to parse out how important it is, because I mean, let's start with genetics. Like, there's people I've met who train in the worst culture that actually aren't that disciplined, who by virtue of being, that 1 in 10,000 or whatever, can slapdick their way to like national championships. I've known those people. But for the most part, if you have a rigid enough culture, you can make up for quite a bit of deficiency. If you have people, it's not just the program in that, I'm doing the right things at the right time. It's your mindset, so that at every single touch, you're getting that extra sense of urgency, and you can't like recreate that on your own. You have to be around like-minded people in a competitive setting that are trying to kill each other, that are going to hold you accountable and point it out, when you miss a set or whatever. It's, it's like compounding interest. When you think about, you get these small little differences in the beginning, you don't even recognize it. It's like, I remember the book when I was a kid that talked about compounding interest. And it was like starting at a certain age with a penny, and then by the time you're 80, you're like a millionaire or whatever because of it, the exponential growth. But those little differences in each set and each touch, they just explode by the end of it. Now, I think for the average lifter and average athlete, they have a huge advantage in understanding that like our culture as a whole gives you a huge boost, because so many people got a lot of bitch in their heart, for lack of a better term. So many people are starting out any endeavor they do with the things they're not willing to do. They have a basic desire to not be too uncomfortable, always have in the back of their mind where their out is. So for the people that are really unhinged, that's an opening. So exactly how you look at the talent from before and say, how much of it is he was very gifted and skilled versus how much of it is he was a psycho. I think Friend was kind of an even mix. I mean, his story early on coming up, it was very much kind of like the underdog that wasn't a good athlete and had to find his, like he ended up getting tutored under like the former like king of hammer throws. I forget the guy's name, was Harold. It's going to come to me,
Connolly.
Harold something, but
Hal
Connolly, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That was him. And he looked at him as a father figure because he grew up. He had this, it was either a strained relationship or his father was absent from like an early age. But you take in that kind of psychological dynamic and you give somebody exactly what they need. Some people need ambition. Some people need to be challenged. Some people need a mentor. They need somebody to look up to. But if you find that need that people have and you can hit it, you can hit that trigger, it can like just set you up to do incredible things. And funnily enough, that's kind of what Louie became known for. I mean, you hear guys talk about that environment. It was a big psychological clusterfuck because he would be like this withholding father figure and he would weaponize his disappointment in people for not giving him a world record to where people were, it's like this, why he always had this relationship that was like, oh, they loved him. And then it would come to a head and they would never talk and he'd leave the gym and then they'd come back 2 years later. But it, you know, that psychological warfare is it's very effective.
So have you ever heard of Brian Oldfield?
No, I haven't.
So he's a shot putter from that era. I would argue like a little bit after the era that you're discussing. So 1960s late all the way up through like the mid 80s, but he's known, it almost seems as though the personality you're describing. So this is a guy that like was on the cover of Sports Illustrated and basically throwing a shot put in like Stars and Stripes underwear, just a larger than life. You know, he was interviewed on like ABC Wild World of Sports and said he had a throwgasm like publicly. Just goes through like was known for lifting weights. There's a story of them there of 2 or 3 guys driving an RV back in up, you know, I forget the route. What is it? Route 1 on the ocean front. And they had an RV with weights in it. And he decided to start squatting in the back and like doing power cleans. And he dropped the weights and the floor of the RV was actually like blown out into the highway. But he was, you know, a legit shot putter. I want to say he might've made the Olympic team once. But just was one of the few guys that threw 70 feet with the glides and then threw the world record, 75 feet, just shy of 23 meters, in the late 70s. And just sounds like George Friend's little brother, basically just an absolute lunatic. I have a quick story where my college coach was on the friendship or whatever it was, the Friendship Cup, where it was the US and the Soviet Union. And they said that, he told me, Coach Groves told me that Oldfield's hanging out a window, by a bed sheet trying to hook up with like a Soviet chick that was below on the apartment complex. And he had lowered himself from like the 10th floor down and they found him like hanging outside. But it just sounds very similar. And it's interesting. What I was going to bring up is like that the type of sport that throwing or powerlifting or weightlifting or strongman, the type of person that becomes attracted to this type of endeavor is also pretty consistently unique. And I know football and all there has a lot of wild, you know, sort of cuckoo individuals, but what do you think that is that draws that in, like the contrarian lifestyle that's so wild?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Because when I think of individual sports versus team sports, I'm always inclined to romanticize that team sports are, you know, the epitome of male bonding and coming together and learning how to cooperate and do something greater than the whole. It's every motivational, you know, it's Remember the Titans. It's every motivational sport movie you've ever seen where, you know, the real lesson is learned at the end that you got to rely on your teammates and it's not about you. And then you have individual sports where it's like, no, it's all about me. This is my show. Nobody's going to take credit for it. Nobody's going to pick me up when I'm down. Nobody's going to pick up my slack if I have a bad day. You know, if I don't show up, I get the yell. That can be, I mean, that can select for positive and negative traits. I like to think, or I mean, I think I've said before that the modern iteration of like recreational individual sports, I think has kind of hyper selected for like that part of like me culture. that I'm not a huge fan of, and I'd like to see a lot more kind of checks and balances in that. But as far as like the big guys, world record holders, the icons, the Olympians, yeah, I think there's probably something attractive to that certain type of egomaniac that's like, this is my show. It's like, I'm the fastest guy in school. Am I going to go get yelled at by a coach, run suicides, for 2-hour practice? Or am I just going to go, run the 100-meter and just dust everybody? So that might have something to do with that, And I noticed this quite a bit going back to that first World's Strongest Man. The energy and the attitudes of everybody was so different. Like, you still see the kind of spread of personality types, people that take themselves more seriously. Like, Frigno kind of took himself seriously. But then like Bruce Wilhelm was like a jokester. He was like just the big kind of chubby, it was like the third Belushi brother, except he, had a 550 behind the neck jerk or whatever. Like, he was just talking shit. He didn't take himself too seriously. He was showing up. He's like, I don't know what we're testing here, but I know that I'm going to win. Like, he was just so jovial, like happy to be there. And it almost makes me long for that, because we are now in this space where there's absolutely no stakes, like seriously no stakes. People take themselves so seriously. And I don't think that's for the betterment of the culture.
I think so. One, Bruce Wilhelm would have been another shot putter / weightlifter around the time of Oldfield, but I still think he was slightly, maybe 5 years prior. I could be completely off with that. Now, going back to what you just stated, it sort of triggered me when you just mentioned like the jovial aspect. If you're on social, and somebody might be commenting this already, is someone like Kyriakos Grizzly. I don't know if you're familiar with him, like the dude who's Greek, lives on the Albanian border. He seems like that guy. Like, he's 50 years old and just does random crazy shit, and just loves it. At least that seems that way. And I guess it's an interesting. It's interesting because I think about that's sort of how I grew up. That's sort of how I grew up training. And then when I trained with Dr. B, it was pretty similar. It was just sort of like the Wild West, as you described, Culver City, Westside, which I was Googling where Culver City is because I'm on the East Coast. All right, I wanted to ask you. I want to come back to this, but I wanted to ask you what would those things be? From an apply. If somebody's listening to this right now, like, all right, what can I take out of this? What were they doing? You mentioned box squats. What else were they doing that also we could do now from a training perspective to be able to lift heavy weights more frequently to increase our volume so that we can actually get stronger?
So this actually connects to one of the reasons, or this connects to the more modern iteration of Westside that we're familiar with, in getting down to the brass tacks of why. I'm not going to say that method overall, but at least in the confines of the actual Westside Barbell Club, why it had the success that it did. And people will assign this kind of mystical, like magical effect of pairing, these Soviet recommendations, these footnotes out of some translated paper to, well, this thing I just picked up from these world record holders, maybe it's the repetition with the max effort with the speed work, or maybe it's the rotation of exercises, or maybe I'm just that good at knowing exactly what gets you strong. Maybe it's the technique. I really believe that if there is something special, like worth taking away from Westside as a whole, it is the fact that you can train maximally more frequently if you're rotating the exercises. That's something that I think is missed on a lot of people. This is something I've seen with myself. This is something I've had people do. This is something I've gathered from people I've talked to over the years. If you look at traditional periodization as we know it, and there's a billion ways to periodize, but if you think of like generally, okay, you're starting at 60%, doing a bunch of 10s, and then to 8s and 6s and so on. The critique has always been the detraining that occurs, right? Because if you're doing 10s and 8s, your strength-specific capacities are going to diminish. They just are. I think that's a benefit personally, and that's why I bias to that, because I don't think it is in your best interest to hit the gas on the same thresholds year-round. But that's just me. That's not to say it can't work. But I've always experienced a lot of positive effects from taking time off, not too long, but you take 6 to 8 weeks from a particular threshold and then come back to it. You're sensitive to it again. You start responding again. It's just like any drug that you would ever take. That the diminished returns, the sensitivity to it that you lose if you run it for too long. Now, because of that critique, you have people saying, well, I'm taking these months to do volume work and maybe I add some size, maybe my capacity gets better. Maybe I hit a PR on what I could do for, a 4x8 or something. But I know at that workout, I'm not going to be able to go hit a PR because I'm not used to maximal weight. So, hey, the most specific thing you can do generally is a max effort single. So how do we train in those strength specific capacities more often? Well, the only way you can do that is rotating exercises. I think most people who lift weights seriously probably went through a phase when they were of a certain age where they were lifting as heavy as they could, as often as they could. It's not uncommon to be like, yeah, in high school, we benched 4 days a week and we'd max every time. And you can do that when you're weaker, when you're novice, because you're too weak to work. You're not a redlining when you're untrained doesn't disrupt your system the same way. But when you're very adapted, very strong, and you can put out all this effort, you've taken the governor off. It creates such a systemic hit. The stronger you get, the more time you need to recover. That's why, a new lifter can max out 3 days before a powerlifting meet and be fine. Julius Maddox is going to hit his heaviest bench like 3 or 4 weeks out. You need that extra time to recover when you're that strong. So how do you get in quality strength work on a regular basis? How do you get more training? Because that seems to be the trend. The best of all time are the people that tend to find ways to fit in more training without running themselves into the ground. Well, to do that with strength-specific stuff, if you change your grip a little bit, if you change the height, if you change the bar, if you change the angle, if you add accommodating resistance, if you make it unstable, there's a million different things you can do. And, they went crazy at Westside experimenting with them. But that is probably the one takeaway. And I started applying that to strongman because I have the same problem. I have to be able to deadlift in conjunction with all of this other bullshit. And it's all just low back, low back, low back, low back. So, okay, am I going to pull from the floor every other week? I've known guys that have done that. They're like, hey, I do strongman events. I pull twice a month. That's it. For me, I'm like, I feel like I need more training, more conditioning. But if I deadlift too often, I get chewed the fuck up. So what do? Well, I find, if I do a trap bar on Monday, I can deadlift from 13 inches on Thursday. I can do events on Friday or Saturday, and I'm usually kind of okay. And I can actually do that for a block without my shit falling apart. If I'm pulling from the floor multiple times per week and trying to do all that, that's a problem. If I was just doing trap bar, I'm going to get overuse issues probably in my knee or hip. If I'm just doing 18 inches, it's going to be too much. So the variation, you're not hitting the exact same structures the exact same way. And that's magical for allowing you to get hard quality work in without compounding that stress in the same way.
I have a lot of questions, and I want to provide some commentary too. I guess my first question would be, let's say, are you rotating? Let's pretend that you have a week where you would do like a trap bar, and then the next day you do a rack pull. Let's say day 3 is another leg day. Are you going to rotate the following week or the third week? Or are you going to use those two differing movement patterns and just like, how would you set that up? Let's just say over a 4-week time frame.
So this is one of the reasons why I've shied away from it. And it's why I've been the most critical of it for the mythos that's been built around Westside and how so many people think like, oh, that's the way to do it. I think it's generally inappropriate for so many people because of like the question you just asked. It's obvious right off the bat. There's a million ways you can rotate. There's guys that'll take the same lift and they'll, do it 2 weeks in a row and then rotate. There's guys that'll rotate every week. There's guys that will have a fixed rotation of the exercises they like. Maybe they go through 2 or 3 exercises and then come back. There's guys that won't hit the same exercise for another year. And it begs the question, how are you selecting exercises? Exactly how do you know that something is going to carry over the way you think it will? It's always nice on paper when you look at these exercises, be like, oh, I'm going to get strong as fuck. And then you realize that you're quadruple mini band bamboo bar bench press that's kind of shaky at the bottom and then like 1,000,000 pounds at the top. Oh, that actually didn't do a lot for my full range band. You never know until you go through it. Then you add in, everybody's leverages and where they're weak and whatever. Do you focus on things that allow you to lift the heaviest? Do you focus on things that target your weak points? There's so many different things you can focus on. So I would be lying if I said there's one way I would do it. The big thing it has going against it is also it's probably its biggest benefit, and that is it relies entirely on personalization.
Mm-hmm.
That's great if you're one of the best athletes in the world and you know yourself and you know the system, because that's what's going to get you a bit higher is how personalized it is to you. That's really shitty if you're a lower level lifter and everything kind of works and you're trying to overcomplicate training by dealing with these obscure different things that might not actually do what you think they do. But I don't want to run away from your question. If I was going to set it up, and I can tell you what I do in my training, the benefit of big barbell lifts is that they do a lot. They cover a wide range, joints, range of motion, a lot of different muscles. So as long as I'm doing something that is somewhat similar in range, that is somewhat comparable in load, is somewhat comparable in difficulty, I know that I'm going to get some positive carryover. As it gets more obscure, as the range of motion gets shorter, you're going to lose that. You develop strength at positions. So if I'm doing a bunch of 3 inches at the top, I could get to the point where I could move 1,000 pounds like that, and it's entirely possible I can't bench any more off my chest. But if I'm stopping an inch from my chest, so I'm doing a spotto press or a one board press, the carryover is going to be very similar. So with deadlifts, I know that pulling from the floor is something I don't have to do that often in strongman. That has a huge energy cost. My priority with deadlifting is making sure I can get enough touches without my recovery tanking, which always happens. So trap bar is easier for me, even though it's not mechanically very similar. The muscles are getting loaded, but the movement pattern's a bit different. So I'm not going to get quite the same carryover, but the recovery benefit's huge. I also do a lot of deadlifts from friendlier heights. And I think I mentioned this before last time I talked to you. I think guys that tend to be able to pull all day, every day, tend to have, the long arms and their knees and hips are really open. They're very upright at the start. And I think that represents less overall strain when you have that build. So deadlifting doesn't take the same out of you. Well, I have short little dachshund arms. So fuck it. I'm just going to put the bar up 3 or 4 inches. And I find I can pull so much more often. And it's still going to give there's no way I'm going to put 50 pounds on my 13-inch pull and my pull from the floor doesn't move. So by finding friendlier movements that are somewhat similar and stacking them together, I can be pretty sure that substantial progress is going to carry over to what I want. And ideally, if I was, really big brained, I probably would be bleeding out of a 7-day week. I've advocated for that before. I think generally people are probably going to recover better if they do. But I'm lazy like everybody else. It's just easier to run a 7-day week. So I probably would take, 2 days, have a workout on day 1, another exercise on day 2. And then that's my split for however long that block is.
So I think you did pretty much answer that. I wanted to bring up, my commentary was going to be in throwing. There's this, and I'm trying to think about how I can pitch this to you, because I don't know if you're familiar with Anthony DiTillo. This is like an old time powerlifter, weightlifter from the 70s and 80s, but he did a lot of rack pulls, a lot of partial lifts, and it's sort of very similar to the Culver City guys you're talking about. He's a guy from actually from Pennsylvania, and he would do a lot of these super heavy, just crazy pin presses and rack pulls and squats off of the power rack. And why I'm pitching and talking about Anthony DiTillo is that it sort of comes into this impact on the 80s and 90s, and partially around the East Germans, and then also I believe partially around Louie. There's this group of throws coaches that are throwers that train throwers now, where they'll say they're looking for a hit, they're trying to get a hit on the nervous system. And so they don't really think that a specific lift matters as much as doing a trap bar deadlift. And it doesn't matter the range of motion. If you're doing a deadlift with, 800 pounds from a rack off of a trap bar, like just the fact that your body has to move it at all, there's this recruitment pattern that's happening neurologically. And it's the same with like a Hatfield squat. They'll load a Hatfield squat up to like 800, 900, 1,000 pounds. And then they'll do the same with like pad benches. So they'll put like a pad on, and we do use pad benches as well, but they'll take this and they'll just overload the shit out of it, but then they only lift twice a week. And it reminds me almost of like a bastardized version of the George Friend, like what he was doing, possibly what he was doing. Cause I don't know for sure, but I wanted to see your take on that, where they're essentially just looking for some, on a regular basis, once or twice a week, and they might lift for like 2 to 3 hours, and then they take off for 2 to 3 days, and then they lift again like 3 or 4 days later, and they do like one lift for like 10 sets of insane volume, and then that's all they do for the entire week as far as in the weight room. But it seems to be like a version of this, like trying to lift as maximally as possible, as long as possible. I don't know if you're familiar with Datillo or if you're familiar with this concept, or what your take is on it.
So you said that type of training he was doing, that was for a sport, or that was for like barbell lifts?
So Datillo was doing this basically like he was a weightlifter. He trained as a weightlifter, but he was also like just in the, close with Hoffman from York Barbell. Now he was about an hour and a half to 2 hours further east from York. So he was a weightlifter by like the classic sense, but he was just in the strength realm, as far as like he just wanted to be dumb strong with everything. Seemed more of like a quiet, larger than life as a human, just huge guy that was a little bit more just obsessed over strength and not as much of the wild. I would say this, I would for using today's terms, George Friend seems like the psycho dude that you knew, that you trained with back in the gym and when you were coming up in high school. And he was the guy that would be squatting in jeans and, was drinking Ultimate Orange, probably ripping ammonia, and then heaters outside. And then you saw him at the dive bar on the weekends, like just being absolutely belligerent, probably was ADD or ADHD and just never was medicated properly and went down the deep end. And then, Datillo seems more like the autistic, dialed in. I just want to really be really good at this and not worry about partying or anything else. I think that's I guess that's almost like the cultural aspect of the attraction of these sports. And then at the same time, there's like the training aspect for coaching and that approach. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, and I'm just trying to think about like those methodologies, like, okay, like the extreme overload thing, like what does it actually do to your body to just handle as much weight as you can over these short ranges of motion. And people want to take that information and apply it to some general template. Like, hey, what can I expect if I do this? Is it worth putting that into my training? Given that that's kind of a rarity in like Olympic lifting, for example. I mean, I actually saw in researching the Culver City Westside stuff, York Barbell actually, I don't know if they were the first, but they came out with like a primordial power rack that was like this narrow. So you'd have the little bars. So it was just enough where you could do short little partials of like overhead press. You could do short, but it wasn't like a fully functional power rack. It was like very confined lifting. And there's videos you could go back of like, I don't know, they were trying it with like Tommy Kono, and they have people like kind of videos of people trying to put the athletes through the ringer and do this kind of new approach to training. It doesn't seem to have stuck around that much. So that's one of the things I always look for is like what methods have kind of survived the test of time and why. If somebody had success with one method, but then you fast forward 20 years and nobody's doing it, well, it must be because it was either too taxing, it wasn't specific enough, it didn't address enough problems, too complex. There's a bunch of reasons things drop off. And I tend to think that, and I use like kind of old timey strongmen for this. thought experiment. If you were to do nothing but those like over like super maximal limited range of motion movements and nothing else, you could get really strong in those positions. Your tendons will get thick. You'll be able to produce this crazy amount of force. And that's how you get things like guys that can do like steel scrolling. If you've ever seen that, you know, or like bending bars, because you have to be very, very strong through that particular range. It's very different than, you know, bench pressing, you know, from top to bottom. However, the people that do that and only do that, they're not going to have an excess of muscle. And wherever they don't train that, they're going to be, you know, exceptionally, not exceptionally, but they're going to be weak. There's going to be a much bigger disparity. So, okay, if you're doing that in conjunction with, say, full range movements where, okay, you're going to be a bit more well-rounded. Well, now you have to think, okay, but how does this interfere with that? How can I do that movement and also recover enough to do the things that are more taxing or put me in weaker positions? And then it all goes back to you as a person, what you can tolerate. So I think we're always going to find examples of people that have had this like very kind of maniacal fixation on just getting under the weight and going nuts. And you're going to find some people where it worked for them for whatever reason, but parsing out exactly why it worked for them, or maybe other people didn't have success, is kind of difficult. So I think it's always safest just to go with consensus.
So I wanted to ask the question of like, what new stuff have you been trying? And it doesn't need to be new, as I'm more so in the sense of like, what stuff are you trying and training right now that is new to your trying, to you attempting? And it made me think about you're reading studies, or at least I've been seeing the stretch partials, right? And it's like doing a chin up, and then you're let's say you do a failure with a chin up, and then you do 30 things here, or dumbbell bench to failure, and then you just sort of bounce here. Do you think that shit has any role in training?
Intuitively, okay, my association with that is based off of every person I've ever seen. Like, I used to live in San Bernardino, and the 24-hour we went to was like under the freeway off like Waterman, and it was pretty urban. I mean, there was like, you know, the population of dudes, you know, that just got out last week because they're doing prison workouts in the corner. Melvin Anthony used to train there. I saw him lifting a couple times there when I was younger. You'd have like the OGs there. You'd have like it was just like a very cool, like kind of crazy eclectic environment. But I remember seeing some of the most like ridiculous shit where my education in whatever bodybuilding magazines, I'm like, well, that's not how you do that. That doesn't seem to be very smart. Because I remember seeing guys and I'd be like, oh, that's a big motherfucker. And then he comes over with the 120s and he's just like 30 reps, just heaving off his chest. I'm like, well, that's stupid. Why wouldn't you go through a full range of motion? Same way you see kids on TikTok right now. They're 19 years old and they act like they know their ass from a hole in the ground. You know, everything they read is completely void of context. It's context you have to get over time from the rest of the world. And it seems to me, given the things that I've seen, given how what's the equivalent of that? Well, that kind of reminds me of a croc row. If you turn it over, I mean, what's a croc row? You're getting a lot of body English and it's really only the top end. Or I do a shit ton of push pressing, which what is that? It's cheating. It's a cheating shoulder press. I'm really good at cheating. So what have I experienced with push pressing for myself and people I program it for? It's that when you get good at it, you deal with so much more load with so much more volume than you ever would with anything else. And my push pressing made my shoulders explode. And this is long before PEDs ever became part of the equation. So when I think of these, I mean, there's certain movements where like, obviously that seems like it would do something. And they're kind of even romanticized. But when we think of somebody like doing that bottom end, just really intense, working the bottom range motion, we're like, well, why would that somehow be different? Or is it that none of it actually works and we're all just full of shit? I have no idea. But I intuit that, like I said, strength develops a position. I don't really understand why hypertrophy wouldn't, like adaptations wouldn't have anything to do with position. I don't think it's as simple as saying one position's like superior or better, but if you're always limited by the weakest range, and if in a full range motion, you're only spending so much time at each position, I mean, it seems that as you fatigue, you can keep going, So it's like, why do we define failure over here and not over here? I don't know. It seems arbitrary. Now, that being said, I hesitate to recommend it to anybody because I think it can turn into like El Campeon style fuckery that doesn't kind of coalesce into anything useful.
I think what's interesting
use with
is
caution.
I guess, well, one, I as you were going through that, it's almost like, okay, if we're going to go into like the science back crowd and they're like, oh, well, this is this brand new thing of stretch partials or whatever. But then I'm going, I get trolled on Instagram or on YouTube because I'll do dips and I don't lock out my dips. And I've dipped with 315 pounds around my balls. Like I've dipped some serious freaking weight.
That's a lot of weight, man.
And it's funny because I'm like, wait, when you were going through croc rows, push presses, short stroke dumbbell benches, short dips, I'm like, fuck, I might have already been doing this shit as I'm thinking through it. And it's interesting because there's I think it was the dude's name was Robert Kennedy and he wrote for Iron Man magazine, and he had a book called Positions of Flexion. So he had end range, mid range, top range, I think is how he termed it. And basically like goes through like the old Jerry Tell, like these are the strength curves of each type of lift and how to hit the muscle based off of the range. And it's like, I think it's interesting how the intuition of training is so much further ahead. Like you're even just going, this is going back to George Friend even and Anthony DiTillo is like, the dudes had it figured out. Not that it was figured out, but the trial and errors of almost of what you mentioned in the very beginning really do come full circle when you're starting to look at some of the stuff that they're testing and research. And it's like, yeah, this is why these guys did it. They might not have had Dr. PhD explaining it, but they knew that's what was getting them or helping them get bigger, along with, compounding the other aspects around training.
Yeah. I always intuit that we have the gold standard, the full range of motion. Like I always think of it in terms of what is the limiting factor of that lift. Now it's going to be different if you're going for a single as opposed to a set of 20 or whatever.
Right.
Eventually it's like pain tolerance and psychology and cardio becomes a limiting factor depending on the exercise. But there's always a limiting factor depending on the range that you're doing. A full range, you're going to have an obvious weak link, an obvious position where all work has to suddenly cease. And people are trying to reduce like hypertrophy all the way down to, it's all mechanical tension. That's all you need to know. And I think that might be important. That might be a useful heuristic, but I think trying to reduce it to one thing is absolute indefensible horse shit. I guarantee, I would bet every dollar I ever make that I could take a population of kids, I could have them train 5 reps in reserve across the board for 6 months and have them grow like fucking weeds, as long as I'm tracking their volume, their intensity, and making sure the amount of work that they adapt to, the exercises they adapt to, the math behind it starts to move forward. That's how so many strength training programs have worked very successfully. The idea that somehow doesn't work or wouldn't be viable in hypertrophy is nonsense. I mean, there's no reason to think that's the case. So looking at the range, if you're going to shorten the range down, you're suddenly shifting what the limiting factor is. And again, I relate it back to strength. If you're a bencher, everybody knows what it's like to take a bench out. Oh, this feels light. And then it's like, oh, that feels terrible. And then you feel just brittle and kind of weak and exposed and you have no tension. You're like, no, I need my lats. You're looking for that trampoline to catch you at the bottom. It's just not there. What adaptations would you expect to somebody who spent most of their time clocking a shit ton of volume on the bottom end? You would intuit that they would get much stronger at the bottom end, that you would intuit that, you think of these studies they do with like chickens where they just like string them up by their wings, or like, I think Eric Helms.
You liked them, yeah.
Yeah, you think of like Eric Helms, like he did, what did he do, the calf one? He said he walked around with a boot on his calf.
Of a fly. They held him in like a fly position and kept stretching him.
If you look at the human body as just meat, and you imagine you go and take a person and just string them up like meat in a lab and force them into this stretch position, the body adapts to those demands. I mean, I would think of like, I don't know, a Russian dancer who's used to squatting down and kicking their feet up. If you live in these positions, it's there's people that have lost limbs. There's people that are born with strange deformities where their body has to move in weird ways. And your body adds meat where you need it, depending on the stress you're imposing on it. So I think people get up their own ass with exactly what molecularly is happening. It's like more things than you can count. So how about you not worry about it? Let's reduce it down to something simple enough that you can actually sink your teeth into and use just a little bit of, trial and error, a little bit of deductive reasoning, and try to come up with something that gives you the right answer. It's like, hey, I did this and then I ended up better. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what hill you're on. If you can find that and then you can just wash, rinse, repeat, you're going to go as far as anybody ever could. There's a point where I get frustrated when I hear people trying to find like, what is the one method? Like we're still trying to look for the one grail, and that completely misrepresents how training works anyways.
Remember, our podcast is sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. If you're a football player, a basketball player, a baseball player, click that first link in the description. Head over to peakstrength.app, go to the Google Play Store, or you can go to the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength, put your email in, and then look for your specific sport. If you're tired of doing a lot of work and not really getting anywhere, we want you guys to get to the next level. All you have to do is download Peak Strength and then submit your email. Click on the specific sport, and when you sign up for 1 full year, you're going to get 38% off. And I'm going to challenge you right now. I'm going to give you this challenge. If you sign up for 1 year, imagine where you're going to be 1 year from today if you're training 3 to 4 days a week. Imagine where you'll be focusing on the things that actually matter 1 year from today. All you have to do is head over to peakstrength.app, Google Play Store, or the Apple iOS Store. Start committing to yourself. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
When you're talking about intensity on a training session, this is a little off this, but I was thinking because you were just talking about like young kids. Let's say somebody's trained for like a year or 2 years. Okay, where do you think intensity actually starts to matter, and where do you think that intensity can be like the bullshit effective reps? Not that it's bullshit, but it's annoying. Where do you think it goes from like, okay, this is the intensity that matters, and then this is where it gets to be like full throttle red line, and it probably doesn't need to happen that often?
You mean intensity is like proximity to failure, or you mean like weight on the bar, or like psychology, or just aggression?
All of it.
All of it.
Like, and I'm trying to think if I have a kid that comes in and they're training with us for like 2 years, I can tell by around 65 to 75%, that's when shit actually is getting done. And then we sort of like throttle back a bit right around like 90%, where it's like, okay, let's work back to our drop sets now. Is there,
if I'm considering like just general adaptations, which you generally want with kids, you're not hyper focused on very specific stuff. They need more motor patterns. They need kind of generally more muscle, generally more strength, generally more psychology and willingness to suffer. And these are all things that they get in the first couple of years. So if I'm just dealing with a kid, general adaptation, how aggressive do I need them? In the very beginning, not much. In the very beginning, just by virtue, I mean, you're talking about somebody that's brand new, just by virtue of going through movements they're not used to, clocking volumes they're not used to, they're going to grow. What I would like to see, and what I've done with the past, is in the first few months where somebody gets comfortable getting under a weight, we keep really high technical ceilings. Because I mean, if you're new, you can go hard. You can go teeth cracking, vein bursting as hard as you want, but usually it looks like shit and it kind of turns into something else. And I think a lot about, regardless of what works best now with somebody that's new or even intermediate, how do you have to train when you get good? And what things are we going to be missing out on if we don't prioritize them now, even if that thing isn't actually what you need now? I don't think it's a bad thing for new lifters to say learning how to cycle, go through training cycles. New lifters absolutely don't need fucking periodization. They absolutely don't need actual cyclical training in order to grow. They could do some step loading or LP thing or whatever, or they could just work within a range and just say, go ham. And you can do that for a couple of years and be okay. However, getting that down, learning that that habit now, is incredible, so that you can transition smoothly as you go farther. Great examples, like if you think of starting strengths, linear progression, what happens? It's too easy in the beginning. Then you get months, maybe a couple months where it's like kind of hard. And then you get into like, okay, every day sucks. I'm living and dying for that last set of 5, and then hoping I can add fractionals next week. And you just grind out. Eventually you have to reset. Something like 5-3-1 is somewhat similar. The frequency isn't as high, but it's somewhat similar. But it's a wave progression. So it's 3 weeks and then the reset is automatic, 3 weeks, reset. Just doing something simple like that, it's going to work about as well for new lifters. It's going to do about the same thing. But now you have a template that you can run way into your intermediate stages. I interviewed Filip Zajacek. I hope I pronounced that right. I believe he's Polish. God, my memory is fucking horrible. I'm like, I'm just waiting for somebody to fact check this. And like everything Bromley said was like a little wrong. Yeah. I believe, dude, it's just, that's making content for a living. It's just in one ear out the other. Filip Zajacek, he won the under 90 kilo World's Strongest Man last year. He is 19, purported to be natural. I actually believe him. And I mean, I'm the type of person that's like, nobody's natural, not because they have to be on drugs to be that good, but just so many people are on. It's like, why would he be? But he's built like it. He looks like it. And I started interviewing this kid and talking to him about when he started lifting, how he started approaching training. And the thing that stands out, how him and his friends started lifting, is completely unrelatable to any American who's watching this right now. Every American, it's like when I talked to Dennis Arnold, Freaky D. He's like, when me and my friends started lifting, we got a bench and we were like smoking Newports in between sets, and we were eating Panda Express. We were maxing every single day. And I got to a 400-pound bench in like a year or a year and a half. And he's like, yeah, we were dirt bags just going hard because we love doing it. And we have a lot of examples of people do that. Philip's like, no, me and my friends, we found, some sources that had good cycle programs, and we would run through a cycle. We're like, oh, that went pretty well. And then we would do another one and we'd make some improvements. We're like, oh, this didn't work. And it was so logical. And I'm like, you were 16 doing that? Get the fuck out of here. That doesn't even make sense. Like, my attention span when I was 16 was just non-existent. So it makes sense to me that when somebody, and it's like young Olympic lifters, it makes sense to me that when somebody gets into a program that confines all of their decision-making, that they can go very, very far. And I think people left to their own devices, they tend to shoot themselves in the foot. You asked me about intensity, and I went off a little side quest. I
was just going to say is like, I think what you're like, to me, what you're saying is the intensity probably doesn't matter that much year 2. However, being in a system does matter because you learn the logic and the steps and the structure and like the institution of training. So you have a little bit more respect for that as a younger athlete. And then you're using these examples. And I see this in throwing. I see it in football. I see it in weightlifting. We have a weightlifter right now who just turned 19, and the kid's, $185 and can front squat 540 for a double. And it's like, dude, this is insanity. And he gets drug tested 4 or 5 times a week or a month. Sorry, a month. Blood work, everything. It's like, dude, but he just grew up, trained with us since he was 11. And it's like, he's just been so dialed in. And I think that's actually the interesting part around training right now as well, is that there's this difference between the elite level kid right now between ages 13 and 20 versus the normal kid. The disparity is substantially larger. So like the normal kid might be like the same normal kid as when we grew up, or at least me. I grew up in the 90s. I'm 42, but and maybe the normal kid is the same normal. But the top end kid today is so insanely developed because they're more exposed to so much more knowledge. So these guys that are getting into it and looking at Philip as an example, it makes sense. And it's probably going to be compounded even more in these other sports. You're seeing kids coming up football. Like, think about quarterbacks today. They're coming up in spread offenses when they're in like fifth grade, sixth grade. So you have QBs making decisions in middle school that people like Steve Young weren't making until they were like a senior in college back, 30 years ago. And I think that is I think it's a real thing. Like how you laid that out.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have all this, there was a video I was planning on putting together soon about like the rise of just stupidly strong teenagers, because it does feel like you pull up Instagram reels and there's like these 19-year-olds that are like built like IFBB pros. There's some guy who goes around doing his like slingshot bench presses with like 800 pounds or whatever as kind of like an exhibition. But there are a handful of guys that just, it doesn't make, and the funny thing is their entire personality, it's like, no, that's a kid. That's a teenager. Like you're meat on your body just developed this way, but you still have the brain of a child to make decisions as such. And I started going back in time, like, is this a new thing? And the funny thing is, and Olympic lifting is the best source we have because it's on like every continent and it's state sponsored and it's organized and it typically gets kids when they're young, at least where they've done it well. And it's been around for over a century. So when I look back through the Olympic lifting data, it is crazy. The world champions that existed that were like 19, people winning worlds when they're 17. You see that this was a thing, and the numbers that existed, and drug testing, all that's part of it. But the numbers that existed in like the 80s from guys that were like in their teens defies reason. Like, how does somebody clean and jerk 500 pounds as a teenager at a relatively light body weight? Like, but that's been happening for a while. So now we have more accessible sports because Olympic lifting is not accessible at all. It's highly technical. The training's monotonous. It's very repetitive. You need a coach. You need all these things in place. So if you don't have that, what do you have? Well, powerlifting's super accessible. Strongman's a bit more accessible. And the competitive arena over the last 20 years has just hockey sticked right up. Part of that coincides with, started with CrossFit, then it went to social media, and now the parts is, you go on Open Powerlifting, and I actually did a breakdown of strength standards using all of Open Powerlifting's data, because you can put it in Excel and find averages for weight classes and stuff, and find, distribution curves to see what's good, what's bad, what's average. And the number of data points that we have as of right now, it's insane. It's in the millions. For individuals who have signed up and competed to figure out what's normal for these numbers. So basically, I think that we've had this talent, but now it's funneling down to things, these different side sports that are starting to get more traction, and you're going to see some stupid powerlifting numbers. We're going to see. Strongman is due for another like quantum leap forward. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I don't want to beat the dead horse on this, but I wanted to share. I was at high school nationals for track this week. Dude, fucking even just thinking about this. I have a girl in 8th grade. So I literally, well, I'll tell you the first story is kid comes up to me. He's like, I watch your throws videos on our other YouTube channel. And he's like, I watch all your videos. I learned how to spin from you. And you reacted to one of my videos. He cleaned 315 when he was 15. And I'm like, dude, he doesn't even look big. Like, he's like a normal sized kid. And I'm like, when I was in high school, I broke our high school record. I cleaned 300 as a senior. And I remember that was like godlike. That was like, you're a dog. It's happening constantly now. And this kid, he was going into 10th grade and he's like 5'11", nothing freakishly big, nothing like heavy, just normal kid. And it's like, I think that's the social media impact. When used well, when used effectively, I'll say, I guess is probably the best way to put it. It's powerful as fuck because you basically have the George Friend environment of Westside in Culver City literally right here in your fucking pocket. And you're going, well, what did Ryan Krauser do today? Or what did Joe Kovacs do today? Or what did the guy across what the Ukrainian kid do today? All right, well, I guess I'm going to try and fucking squat this or whatever it might be. And it really becomes this, like, it's a wild thing that's happening. And I think it does go back to if we can continue to put out good content around proper training and proper growth over a long period of time, the logic can help continue to lead to this long-term development even further.
So knowing all of that, the social media is exposing people. How do you feel? I have a feeling I know where you stand, but how do you feel about the claim that all of this exposure to the highest performers is making the boys sad?
So if I watch, okay, so if I'm painting this, you're asking the question, like, pretend I'm a 15-year-old kid. Now, would I be comparing myself to another 15-year-old, or would I be comparing myself to like Saquon Barkley posting his videos? I'm a 15-year-old running back and I get sad because I watch Saquon Barkley's training, or I get sad because I see other 15-year-olds training?
All of it. You see the highest performers across the board. You see you're constantly being inundated. I mean, the big thing's physique, the social media inflation of physiques, or seeing the strongest possible people that seem so far away and so hopeless. It seems like so hopeless you would ever get there. And it's changing people's perspective. It's deflating their ego. It's giving them a complex, because it's all of these unrealistic expectations.
I would say that is not, I would relate that more to poor parenting than I would to specifically social media. Now, I'm not going to say that like there's times and like I might watch someone else. Let's just, as a straight up trigger here, I might look at Mike Israetel and I might see his physique, and I might, as a 42-year-old, be like, damn, man, I want to get leaner. Now, I want to get leaner. Now, that might be my root response, possibly. But then I put it through a filter because I'm more mature. I've had more experiences. I've thought about context. And I look through and I say, well, my dad's had heart issues. My cardiologist says I have high blood pressure. He told me to get to 215. I should get down to 215. And I like looking lean, and that's okay. Like, I think that's like a more mature way of looking at it. But I have the filter early on to, after I make that initial like meathead analysis of Mike's body or whatever, I don't know. People can take that for what they want. Now, as a young kid, it's up to, in the case of, I've got a 14-year-old. So if my 14-year-old son is watching Saquon train, just as a popularity aspect here, and he's looking at Saquon train with his shirt off and he's going like, oh, woe is me. It would be up to the parent to be like, look, I grew up watching, dude, my dad would record Olympics and we would watch the VHS cassettes and then go lift weights. So we would watch, like, actually my oldest son is named after a dude who lost an Olympic semifinal that my dad would have us watch this. His name's Lincoln McElravy. And we would watch it. And Lincoln McElravy lost this match to a guy named Danny Galli, and he crawls off the match. And then my dad would be like, see, you don't want to feel that. You don't want to feel that loss. You don't want that. And then we would go train. Is that fucked up a little bit? Maybe. But guess what? It is also motivational to see that, and to see someone feel this like bad thing happen from, having a good work ethic. And I guess where I'm going with this would be like, we would watch even like ESPN 30 for 30 back in the day. Like, we would watch those videos and go lift weights. And I don't think it's much different than, I think it still comes back. I think it can happen. I think it makes sense because it is so accessible. And there's people that do have shitty parents that, like, their parents don't support them as much. They're not as caring and those things. Is it social is the root issue? I think to a point it could be a problem, but I think the root issue is more so around our lack of, and this is funny because I wanted to ask you this question to get into like the alpha male shit, is like, we don't clarify what a superior person is or what a good person is as a society. And so like, we have young kids that might make that decision that like, oh, the body is that Larry Wheels has is like what I should have, and I'm a bad person for not having that. Because we don't clarify the superior person, we have people that make those poor judgments or poor judgments of themselves that leads to a mental disorder or whatever it might be. So I don't know if I'm answering any of your questions, but ultimately I think a lot of that in a perfect case scenario, you would have good parenting that would help you constantly navigate those struggles and how to get through the comparison game, in my mind.
I agree. Every time I see unrealistic standard or whatever, and people try to relate it to, whatever the mental health issues or whatever you like. I mean, this is an oversimplification, but I immediately think, okay, there's the people that were fortunate enough to be brought into a family that taught them how competition works, how it is to live in a world where there's disparate outcomes and people are going to have different talents and they're going to have different benefits or privilege or whatever. And it's different for everybody versus the people. And I view it kind of as the bottom. I think it's the least serious lifters. I think it's the one that want to control the environment and the popular culture, even though they're engaged probably the least, trying to bring the attention back to themselves. Like, I feel like it's so toxic. I feel like it pulls from the playbook of like when we all had to sit through assemblies in the 90s over anorexia because there was this epidemic with young women that were going, and it's all, well, it's the magazines. If only the magazines didn't show that, if only, it's these expectations. As consumers, there's no way around this. You can only blame the things the people who make the things you consume so much, whether it's media, magazines, or products, whatever. There has to be some responsibility on consumers to have a correct narrative in their head when they're digesting things. And I think a big reason that you're seeing this is because you have people that are avoiding that or they don't have it. Part of that's parenting. I absolutely agree. Part of it, social media is cancerous as it is, but that doesn't mean you can't navigate it better. For the life of me, I don't understand why you would be able to watch pro wrestling as a kid, watch Arnold in any 80s action movie, watch the most ridiculous expressions of human performance in the Olympics and have it not hit you. But if you see somebody that's like a little too jacked, it's like, okay, well, I need some meds to make it through this existential crisis. I think it's all framing. I think it's entirely framing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, you had mentioned earlier, everybody has a little bitch in their heart. And it's funny because the best thing, and I wrote down one of the things you had mentioned is like the extra sense of urgency, having a little bit of competition, right? And then it's like, gosh, where did I write this? Fucking A, I have so many freaking notes, but it's like the aspect of everybody does have a little bit of bitchiness in their heart. Like we all have it. And if we recognize like part of that bitchiness is, when you see someone on social or whatever, and again, social media, dude, that's why when people DM me stuff on Instagram, like I don't click on it because I know if I click on it, it screws with my algorithm. So I'm not watching your cat videos. Like I have full control over my algorithm. And I know it takes about 28 to 30 days for it to recorrect after I click on your dumb shit. So I don't do it. And I think like one, it is important to, and the biggest people who are the result of this is somebody like the boomers. They can't comprehend how algorithms actually work, which is mind blowing. But to go back to this is, the bitchiness is partially just coming to the surface in like blaming, seeing a again, using Larry Wheels or whoever has a physique or Arnold back in the day. Oh, well, now I'm going to be sad. Well, no, I think the thing that's interesting, that's so attractive to the gym and the selling point that we'll make at our gym specifically is that we don't we don't sell like we're going to get you a college scholarship, or we don't sell that we're going to get you, you're going to be this next person as an athlete. We sell like, look, your kid is going to learn work ethic. They're going to learn what motivates them. They're going to learn long-term commitment. They're going to learn responsibilities. They're going to learn impact, because they'll learn that if they stay up late, they're going to lift like shit the next day, and I'm going to yell at them. They're going to learn what a hangover feels like at 8 a.m. when they got to squat the next day. And it's like they learn so many deeper lessons that can really cultivate who you are as a person. And it helps lead. And I would even make the argument to a point is that the surface level bullshit of like, okay, I see this person's physique, or I watch somebody on the Olympics do something, or whatever it might be. I watch a movie and Arnold pulls some girl because he's better looking. Those things can lead a kid into the gym. Okay. For sure. They can lead a kid into the gym, but ultimately what they'll learn in the gym is much more positive, is much more deep rooted. It's much more real. And it's like, does that make it bad that like I would spin it to people to take the image stuff, and if you feel that way, do something about it. Recognize that you can control the way you look, to a point. You can lose weight, you can get more muscle mass, you can train harder, and you will feel then later on you will learn. And I think this actually goes back to like the George Friend, the Anthony Detillo, or the culture discussion, is that like you actually end up learning that like the most important factor of training is that you learn who you are, and you learn how to work, and you learn those factors, and that ends up leaking into if you have another job and you got to work with somebody that you don't like, or if you whatever, it helps you deal with these other things emotionally, I think, a little bit better. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
Yeah, the big lesson, and I mean, I credit my time lifting to that, because it's like, okay, I had some good competitive placings over a few year period that I worked up to over a long time. I learned a lot. I, made it my career, which is kind of cool, but really, I mean, I'm a kind of overweight, patchy ginger potato now, who's constantly getting comments from kids watching my videos, why would I want to look like, I don't know, Mr. Potato Head with rosacea or whatever. There's some creative ones that come in. And I'm like, so what did I get out of all of this over all of the years? And it's like, I always go back to, I'm like, I could be a paraplegic. I could like be a stump with no limbs. I could be 600 pounds. It doesn't matter where I'm at physically now, because the thing that's like embedded into who I am and what I've done, it was that journey. It was the years I clocked proving to myself that I could get good at something, and absorbing the discipline, learning. I mean, you learn so much, like, what is it to want something? When do you decide to put your head down and go through no matter the obstacle? Or when do you decide the juice isn't worth the squeeze? How do you plan? How do you find good advice? How do you sift bullshit from, the things that are essential? And how do you deal with wanting something, not quite getting it, but still having the wherewithal to keep going, because that's just what you do. And a lot of that is, it can't be replaced with anything else. And in the face of like what this entire environment is right now, you get so much emphasis on the bad feelings that people have when they don't get what other people have. And it's this twisted type of envy. I think it's great to be envious of somebody if you remember, what it is you believe, how badly you want it, and your capacity to change your circumstances. Be envious and have that drive you. But so many people have this like twisted kind of envy where it's like anybody who's gotten anything it's somehow at the expense of other people, or they must be dishonest or undeserving, or they're skewing it for the rest of us, and my position is worse, because it's like whether or not they say it, it bubbles underneath the surface. And it's really sad, because it's highly anti-sportsmanship. It's like antithetical to anything you would ever learn in an actual sport. And I'm just seeing more and more of that in fitness culture, which is unfortunate. And I don't know what the the curb against it is one thing that this conversation sparked, the whole Malibu FitMax thing. Did you cover that? Do you even know who that is?
No.
Okay.
Is that the Peter Attia was in the Epstein files thing or something different?
No, this juicier. It's so much juicier than that. No, so there's this guy that blew up on social media. pun intended. He got big on social media over a month. He went from like a few hundred to over 1 million subs. And the reason was he was kind of jacked, had kind of like a himbo plastic surgery face with like long blonde hair, looked like a beach bum in LA that got a little jacked and got a lot of work done. But people were making fun of his face, and he had in his description that he was a vet and he survived an IED to the face.
I think I saw. Okay, keep going. Yeah, I think I saw this.
Yeah. So anyway, it was this big, and I'm a gossip queen. I love drama in the space. Like that's why I made my other channel, so I could funnel the gossip over there without it poisoning my more substantive work. So anyways, he ends up getting found out. Goob, the fitness internet sleuth, Goob ended up outing him, finding all these records showing that it was false. It was stolen valor. Now, all of these people are coming to his defense on the basis of positivity. He's a positive figure because he has this smile. It's almost like a Joker smile plastered to his face all the time. And he's a laid back dude. He's a chill dude. He's positive. The world's such a bad place. We have all this positivity. So where there's like this pass given for genuinely bad behavior, like the worst type of, it's everything that people complain about in the fitness industry: manipulative, lying, representing yourself as something you're not. The guy's obviously on gear. He has that kind of old dude on gear build where he goes into bodybuilding shows, and it's like you tell he's on gear, but he still kind of looks like shit. He doesn't train his legs. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's like a low tier crunch fitness trainer. So he does these tutorials online. It's like the worst shit you've ever heard. It makes you want to put your face through a window. Everything that everybody's ever complained about in the fitness space. And this people in the comments left, oh, he's positive, bro. The internet's such a toxic place. It's like nice to have this voice of positivity. And it's just such a cancerous way of looking at the world. And
I think there's something to be said for, and I respect, because I do think about this with like somebody like some meathead guys will complain that Jeff Cavalier from Athlean X is like, oh, he's a tool, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, okay. Well, the thing is though, with Jeff is like, he's actually getting people to exercise and to do things. Like they're getting off the couch and they're following his program, and he's getting people to work out. By all accounts, I don't know. He's never really struck me. It's not my cup of tea, but like he's not falsely representing who he is. And I think there's taking Jeff, who has impacted a lot of people. You can't take that. And one of the guys that I'm friends with, he's like, I don't like him, but I know he impacts a lot of people in a positive way. Okay. You can't take that and lay that over top of someone else who's falsifying who they are, who's lying about who they are, who has misrepresented who they are. And I'm starting to actually feel that way, that I think there's a lot of influencers who will pawn products and push things in a false way. Meanwhile, they're sauced to the gills. Meanwhile, they'll be doing these things that they want, like that they'll claim that they use. Meanwhile, they're full throttled up, which is fine. Like, dude, if you want to be on drugs, I don't fucking care. But don't say like, this is what I do to get this. And then meanwhile, you want, little Johnny, who's 22 years old, to come off the couch and take this stuff. Because I think the misrepresentation is the negative. And then going into what you're saying, like, dude, if someone's lying, like, what's the difference between that guy and like Liver King? If he's lying about who he is, and like, yeah, he might be positive. Do we know, like, if he's lying about what he is on the front, do we know what he's lying about behind closed doors, like Liver King type shit? Like, do we know, like, I still think this is where I did want to ask you this philosophical question is like, and I used this term earlier. The Confucianism literally has a definition for how people are superior and how people are small. Like weak-minded, small men. And they have a very clear, like, this is what it means to be a good person and to be a superior man. This is what it means to be a small man. We don't have that very clear definition, and we don't dial that in, so someone can manipulate you, and still you'll be, because like, yeah, maybe he has impacted people, a couple people with positivity. Maybe he has, but it doesn't mean he should continue to have some type of power in the realm, because he's a freaking liar. He's not a good human being. He's doing it for his own means, for his own profit in some way, and that in turn leads, and by definition, he's probably not a good person.
Yeah, it's going to be super. I got that vibe. It's going to be super unpopular to say, well, depending on which group you look at. But I've been around so many gyms and so many places across the country. There's different types. Like, you could fill up an entire encyclopedia with different cartoonish types to represent different gym characters. You know, I'm sure you could with just throwers and track athletes, of like, whether it's mindset or quirks or whatever. It's like the humor writes itself. But this guy is a type. It's the kind of not very intelligent kind of surfer dude, kind of like, oh, it's all good, man. That's not very thoughtful. That's very superficial. I remember seeing a clip of him before he started lifting, and he was very skinny, very small, and he had that same smile plastered to his face that I see as a red flag. The fact that people misidentify that as positivity is mind-boggling to me, because that's a mask. That's an affectation you learned, gets a good result. The same type of people that pick that up are, sociopaths, people that actually, yeah, they're manipulative. They learn, and the reason they come off as being off is because whatever they emote is learned. They learned it in a rote kind of mechanical manner, as opposed to the kind of natural, intuitive way that we learn to emote based on our interaction. So they're like a step removed, and it seems kind of alien, seems kind of foreign. But the nervous smile every time anybody says anything, I'm never not smiling. I don't want to act like I'm going to like diagnose the dude from afar, but that's not something that should be lauded. It's not something that you should pat somebody on the back for. Their compulsive, weird, nervous smile, their take it easy attitude. It's a sign of so much that's wrong. And it all goes back to social media. It's a cancer.
Yeah. How would you combat this? Or like, let's pretend you got, let's say you have a teenager right now. How do you combat that? Like, if there's a kid still watching this, how would you be like, yo, you gotta be aware of charlatans, or be aware of this, but at the same time be like, I want you to learn how to be aware of it. I don't want to just, I think that's the other aspect, is like, we need to teach people how to like operate through these things and to learn them themselves as well. Because it's like, my 14-year-old, I'm like, dude, there's some people that are absolutely full of shit, and you're going to have to figure that out. You're going to have guardrails to go through this. And I guess, how would you do that in your position here? Like, what would you try to get somebody to learn?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that you can't know whether or not somebody's full of shit until you've engaged with their content for a good period of time. And that goes back to the consumer having a narrative that's appropriate and principled for how to navigate this crazy Wild West clusterfuck that is social media, where so many people with nothing of use to say are the loudest voices in the space. So it's always, you start with skepticism. You make other people prove to you that they are as good as they want you to believe, or that they're as useful, or that their advice is worth a good goddamn. Now, the guy's advice is like pretty harmless. So he's flirting with charlatan. I feel like that's giving him too much credit. But it's just bad generic advice. It's like the first time you ever talk to somebody at the gym and they're like, you really just got to make sure you do that 3-second eccentric. That's really the important part. Or they're given little tweaks of how to dumbbell bench. Like, it's mind blowing. Most of it is like Costco runs and like him trying to lift or dicking around at the gym. So I'm not worried about anybody having their training suffer. I'm not worried about the integrity of lifting as a culture, but I am worried about the precedent that people routinely give passes to people that behave badly based on vibes. I think my son, I knock on wood, but I think my son's going to be pretty good with this. I mean, I'm a judgmental prick as it is. So he's going to grow up to me pointing the finger at people being like, that guy's problem. But his mom and I both have a background in like mental health and, my wife is, she's getting licensed to be a therapist. She was a social worker for a lot of years. So she knows people very well. She has a very good intuition for people. And it's just, it's being aware. The way I see it, because people are terrified of judging a book by its cover. And I think that's the backwards way to go about it. Like, what, you're going to give everybody you meet the benefit of the doubt? You do the opposite. It's like you just have the smallest barrier in front of you. Just the smallest bit of skepticism separating you from the other person. And as you're around them long enough, you allow that to come down if they earn it. That's what it is. You don't have to be isolated or like a weird antisocial individual, but it's just give yourself a little bit of space to figure out if somebody is what they claim they are.
I think the interesting part here is I remember, so I compare social media to like reading books or magazines growing up. And I remember my dad saying, not everything you read in a book is right. So the lesson there, and I'm going to share some also from my dad, which is interesting. I think the critically reading people, critically learning is a really hard skill. And I don't think I personally learned that till I was like 20, 21, like in class. And I remember being in a New Testament class because I was a religious studies major and being like, oh shit, now I'm like critically analyzing this text. Like, wow. I remember and I remember the professor, his name was Dr. Bill Peterson, being like, I learned it. Like, I actually learned it. And going back to what my dad had said, this was also from the same guy who would never filter Rush Limbaugh. I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh for hours on end and being like, believing everything this dude was saying. So I think the funny thing is like, I guess where I'm going with this is like being able to critically learn and critically analyze is important. And it's an important skill we all need to continue to hone in on. The one thing that I was going to bring up is that, is it important to have almost a critical / negative skepticism of people? Or do you think it's better to be a little bit more jovial and open-minded, but have that like on like stuff, the way that you're still critically analyzing who that person might be?
Yeah, that's interesting to try and give as a blanket recommendation, because people are so different. And the way they engage with people as is going to be so unique. And then if you try to plug in one, heuristic or strategy, it's going to be expressed differently. I almost feel like that's too broad of a way to approach it, because I'm going to justify whatever advice I give by the people I think that are going to follow it the right way, not thinking of all the people that are going to take it too far or misinterpret or whatever. There's some people that don't have a very good sense of people. And it's like, what do you do with that? Or there's other people that are too emotional. And, speaking of like Limbaugh or politics or religion, have very strong associations, and they can give into those biases to kind of unfairly cut other people off. There is this duality that exists. It seems contradictory. It's like you have to be open to being around and experiencing people, or else you're not going to get anything done in life and you're going to be miserable. But also there has to be this keen sense of when something goes too far. It's probably just going to be an endless cycle of that critical analysis, probably doubting your conclusions. But over time, as you pick up experience, over time, as you have better, more detailed frameworks to view other people through, the big thing I worry about are the actual red flags. And I can't even talk about red flags without thinking about all the people that think they know red flags. And really, it's just this hyperbolic expression of their biases. It's every, teenage girl that's taken a psychology class and cracked the DSM and thought she could diagnose her ex-boyfriend with 4 different personality disorders. You have to build a better sense of people. And that eventually is going to show you the lines that really are too far. The lines that the hints that, oh, this person is capable of doing some damage or complicating your life. There's a very small group of people that applies to. I mean, if we think of like distribution curves, you can apply that to almost everything in regards to describing human beings, whether physical characteristics or whatever. But it's same in crime statistics. Everything boils down to a very, very, very small group of people that commit just in like, it blows your mind the amount of work that has to be done to rack up that many felonies or to get arrested that many times. It's not the person that had a bad run-in as a teenager once or twice with the cops. It's a person that is like, as a career, as a way of life, is impulsive and is emotional and is erratic and is, whether addiction or mental health issues, whatever. So as I've gotten older, I've taken the breadth of experience I've gotten from all these different fields and a lot of personal experience. And that's really what I'm looking for. That's really the thing where I'm like, am I witnessing something that I think is going to potential where the juice isn't worth the squeeze of potentially, is this going to cause more trouble or make me and my family vulnerable in a way that I'm not willing to accept? And when I think that might be the case, I take it fucking seriously. To the point where like we've lost friends because I didn't like the precedent that was being set for me, my wife, and the kids that we're having. There's certain expectations I have for what I'm willing to expose my family to. And if I see something that's deviating from that, I'm out. If you're working with somebody, if you're in a cooperative environment and you recognize these things, you gotta be able to see them first and then hopefully find some coping mechanisms. But you're not going to summarize the way to handle crazy people in a single podcast, unfortunately. But I mean, awareness is the first step.
That example that you just brought up, what age do you think it's okay to tell your kids like why you stopped being friends with somebody?
Ooh, that's a good example. That's a good question. It's a very good question because you want your kids to be aware, but also there's the appropriateness of the subject matter and the reason. And then there's the,
and like, again, I want my kids to make their own decisions as well around specific people that I have removed myself from. But I also feel like there's a point where like, I could just be like, yo, like we stopped hanging around with this individual because they manipulated me and for their own good and for reasons that are not okay. But I haven't told my kids any of this stuff. But that was like a thought I had that I've never really thought through.
I mean, I would think by the time they're teenagers, you could probably have that conversation. I mean, I would think before they're teenagers, it's probably less relevant to them in their worldview, right. But I don't see any reason why, somebody that's 10 or 12 years old wouldn't be able to grasp unless it was some really, really sensitive subject matter. But, I mean, because that's a big decision you're making and you're making it presumably because there's high stakes there. You think there's high stakes. So as far as being able to set an example for your kids, so that they learn how to navigate those situations without just defaulting to what everybody likes to do, which is, just haterade. Oh, they're haters, or, it's always them. It's never us. I think as long as you have the conversation in an intelligent way, I would think your kids would be on your side.
So before we go, because I did want to ask this: is who do you want to be around, or who do you and your family, who would you want to be around? Because I think that's another aspect. It's like clarifying both ends. Like, this is who we want to be around. This is who we do not want to be around. And that clarification can then lead to providing a good lens for for making these judgments of where that gray area turns into,
Sure.
black or white or whatever it might be.
Well, that's so huge because it's like they say, you're the average of your 5 closest friends, like the people you associate with the most. This is a big lesson I'm going to drive into the skull of my child at a very early age, is you are who you associate with. When you're at that age where the only thing that matters is making your friends laugh, well, if your friends are a bunch of impulsive degenerates that come from a very loose family structure where there's no boundaries, basic pro-social behavior is an afterthought, it's like that's going to influence you and that's going to affect your future, how other people see you. It's going to hurt your prospects, and on and on. For me and my family, and this is something we're in the process of, we moved to where we are in Arizona less than a year ago. So every time we go to like meet new people, or every time we, introduce our kids to somebody, it's like, okay, who are we bringing around? Who are we going to associate with? Who's going to influence us? And it's crazy. Even couples, when you think of like, oh, there's that crazy couple, and let's say they're into some weird stuff or something. You're like, well, that's just them. They're quirky. People are really quick to be dismissive because of the social taboo around being judgy. Nobody wants to be called judgy for some reason, which is bizarre. But I'm super sensitive to that. I know for a fact I don't want to be around anybody who I deem as chaotic, no matter how well-intending they are. If I identify behaviors that I think is going to predispose them to like emotional ups and downs, if I see bad decision making, if I see people kind of using their bullshit to command the spotlight, that's like, I don't want to be around that. Anything I think might destabilize the unit of my family, it's going to be a hard pass. It's going to be a no-go. Unfortunately, that describes a lot more people than you would think. And you want, but then again, everybody's flawed. So it's like, you have to have some tolerance for people. We're not perfect. You have to have some tolerance. But the thing I'm the most sensitive to by a mile, it's people that are generally chaotic, always in crisis. Standards are probably another big thing. You have this idea that people you want to hang out with are successful because that type of networking is super powerful. It influences you. It hits you in a really substantial way. So,
also,
it's become kind of that. I know it when I see it.
I think more stable people can make more consistently positive decisions and positively impact others around them, which helps them grow. But they're just consistently more, at least for me, I can clearly define when I started going to therapy to deal with all of my emotional like rage and anger and aggressiveness and inability to not want to put somebody's head through the wall. When I started to like, I'm hoping I've made this change, I could see like, wow, I can like make a lot better decisions when I try and calm myself down and make and get myself to decompress in a moment. So people who never really had to learn that skill because it's innate, they're just generally more stable people to be around, and they're more successful because they're making more logical decisions about everything. And it's like, you learn real quickly why the kid that you went to high school with, who was like a normal kid, is really successful now. When you're 40 plus years old, you're like, oh, well, that kid could just consistently make, and it goes back to like the compounding interest and also like the cultural stuff. It's like, that kid just regularly made good decisions in every aspect of his life. And now at 40 plus, they're really successful because they didn't fuck it up. They just kept doing the right thing.
It's like the best advice in the world for people that find themselves in bad relationships on a regular basis. That's another sign. Like, you don't just go through relationships when you're younger, but it's like each one is like, either it's abusive or domestic violence, or it's these kind of extreme experiences you have. It's always repeating some trauma. It's always this learned behavior from when you're young. You're trying to revisit what you're familiar with, reestablish the chaos. And the best advice you give to people that are in the throes of that vicious cycle is to look for what's boring. Stop trying to find the spark, the thing that's exciting. Stop trying to find the thing that lights you up. Boring. Boring is good. Boring is stable. You can build something substantial off of boring, but you have to learn to interpret it, to associate it as something that's valuable. And it's the same way with your friends. I mean, who's a person everybody loves being around? It's a person that's unpredictable, over the top, the person that's always getting into something, the more, and I've learned to kind of associate people that are eclectic with like, it's like, yeah, you go be eclectic over there, because you peel back that curtain and it suddenly stops being really interesting. When you see how you hang around eclectic people in general for a long enough time, and it's like, oh, this isn't cute anymore.
So you had said something earlier, and I agree with this. So we all have bitchiness in us. You had mentioned like the ability to suffer is sort of paramount. And I would probably say there's a point where the ability to suffer is paramount to success. But for some reason, I don't even think suffering is the right thing. I think it's the ability to deal with the boring and like it's like the more dude, I'm thinking about this with training. Like, why does the 18-year-old who can front squat 500 plus for reps, why is he that strong now? Because we just front squat and back squat and we do the boring shit over and over and over again. Well, why was the successful guy that you go to high school with, a theoretical guy? Well, he just made the right boring decisions over and over again. And it's like, is it if you reframe it from suffering to boring, it's like, oh, okay, I just need to like keep shit boring. Like, hey, it's like, I don't know, maybe seeing it through that lens could be helpful for someone completely out there. I don't know.
It's like I think it was a Dan John quote, something to the effect of like, more world champions have been built off punch the clock workouts than monumental efforts, which seems obvious. It seems obvious. The number you open social media, we love watching old Larry Wheels videos. We love watching people bleed out of their face and go crazy. Chuck Vogelpohl about to get under a squat. We love seeing this. But the monotony of showing up, sticking around, doing the boring work that you don't want to do is that's what makes shit work long term. Our entire world, all the technology we have, all the abundance we take for granted, it develops on the back of people just doing their day job and just doing the small repetitive tasks that are needed to produce things that work well. There's this is kind of a weird aside. I don't know if you ever watch cartoons. You seem like a grown man who probably doesn't spend much time, but I have like one of my channels, like a movie channel, and it's like pop culture and TV and stuff. And I was like doing this, I was covering this episode of Rick and Morty, which is, I like the show, but one of them specifically is about their entire family being in therapy. And the whole premise is you have this super genius who's like mastered the universe. He has portal guns and he's overtaken every intergalactic threat you could think of, but his family life is a disaster. And he, to get out of going to family therapy, he turned himself into a pickle. So it's a super bizarre episode. But at the end, he's getting lectured by the therapist, and he's like, she's like, I know you find therapy boring. It's like, your intellect, I'm just like a cockroach to you. But the thing about maintaining your family, maintaining your life is it's not exciting. You can't do it so wrong that you might kill yourself. It's boring. It's work. It's just something you do. And it's like that kind of stuck bouncing around in my head because that's like the truest thing. Boring is almost this weird subset of pain, that you have to learn to tolerate. But in the exact same way, not only does that allow you to do things that you have to do that people avoid, but it also clears your brain out from the constant stimulus we're getting. I mean, learning to be okay with boredom is an antidote to the shit that social media is doing to our emotions and to our attention spans. So being able to sit with just your thoughts, to be kind of like, oh, I got to do something. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah, plug your channels while I'm dealing. Like, tell me what are the other fucking channels you're doing? This is where we can start editing again. Tell me the other YouTube channels. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm jealous of you.
Let's see if I can remember them. My main channel has a lot of. Well, I just set them up. I'm still in the process of getting them monetized because you have to redo it with each new channel. So they're like aging out, and then once they're monetized, I can justify putting a lot more time into them. But I got a pretty good bump, or I have a pretty good following with my main channel. But the problem is, the bigger you get, the more you get punished if you deviate from what your core audience followed you for. So it's little shit. Like if I'm talking about training recommendations as opposed to reacting to something online as opposed to equipment review. There isn't as much leeway. And the beginning of this year, YouTube started doing some crazy shit. I don't know if you noticed view drops, but the last 2 months, my views got massacred. I heard it has something to do with like the thumbnails are now bigger. So there's fewer options on screens. They're trying to reduce decision fatigue in people by giving them less options. So shit doesn't get shown as much. But whereas like a bottom level video that wasn't a very popular topic might get like 30,000 views, 40,000 views. Now it gets like 6,000 views. Right. Yeah. So I have to be a lot more careful about it. Anyway. So all of that is like, okay, I got to compartmentalize things out. Anyways, Brom's Garage, that's going to be home gym review type stuff. I got a pretty robust garage gym, and I like reviewing equipment. And I honestly dislike most of the equipment review stuff online because it's everything that you don't need to know about. I mean, they're going over like the bushings and the barbell and stuff that's just over the head of the average consumer.
I'm building a 4,000 square foot garage.
Nah.
If we flew you out, we would do an in-person collab, and you'll help me build the garage equipment.
I mean, yeah, I would. I mean, I'd do that, but I feel like I'm not going to do any better than you would. Like, I mean, I'd love to help. Absolutely. I'd love to help, but
Jason's
I'm a minimalist.
Room, like, yeah, do it. Let's just do it. Fuck it.
I'm down. Absolutely. Shit. I can't remember the last time I talked to somebody in person.
Okay, what's the next channel? So you got Brom's Garage.
So Brom's Garage, I got Braun Swanson. The fucking names I got Braun Swanson. That's my React channel. So far, that is by far the most popular one. I'm trying to avoid going full Doucette, but it is things I see on Instagram I think are interesting or worth talking about. And those are easy to do, and they're fun, and I enjoy them, and there's demand for it. Just not most of the people that follow me already. Then I got Base Strength. So that's, I know you have a channel, Peak Strength, right?
Yeah. Base Strength's your app, right?
So that's my book. And then it's also my app. Yeah. And so that's the programming channel. So that's going to be like whiteboard stuff. That's going to be breaking down, sets and reps and program reviews and stuff like that. And then my main channel is just going to be like long form essays, the animated, like hand-drawn explainer stuff that has a bunch of like cheap shit posting humor. People really like those, so I'll save it for that. And then I have one more. It's Brahmarama, and that's all like TV and movies and pop culture. And it's where I do the old man yells at sky over the state of things now. So
you're gonna have you'll have 5 channels.
Yeah. Yeah, basically I wanted more leeway on any given day. I can talk really clear. I can talk really clearly off the cuff about things that are in my head, where it's like, it's low effort. I can say what I got to say and film it, whatever. But I needed an avenue to put these different things because my main channel, it has to be like one thing and one thing only. So hopefully it's better, not worse. I don't know. We'll see.
It's funny because I was just thinking through, I said, you're crazy. And I'm going, okay, we have Peak Strength, which we currently have been sort of inactive on, but we have an idea how that's going to roll. We have GS. We have a clips channel now that has really started to grow where we're putting podcast clips. So you will be living there as well as on the main channel. And then I have Throws University.
Yeah. So you guys have a lot, right? Yeah,
we have a weightlifting one that we got rid of that's still there, and then I have a secret channel that I'm currently using that I like using, but I have not revealed to the world yet. So I guess I do have similar numbers to you. I think it's just so fun to like.
What topic is it in?
It's in money. Say? It's like financial shit that I just.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's a lucrative niche.
Well, for me, it's like I didn't. Like, dude, I didn't learn shit. Like, I didn't know what a 529 was until like 3 years ago. And I'm like when you said compounding interest, I was like, holy shit. I remember being like, wow, compounding sort of fucking wild. And like, I feel like I don't want to do. I want to help my kids, and that's sort of like I've also had a like two fortunate like scenarios in my life that have set me up, and I it's helping me learn more and more about it. So I really do care about it because I also don't want to fuck up my finances personally. So
Understood.
yeah,
Understood.
okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask you the question now. Okay,
All right.
this is, and then you got to give us a question back. So this is like the whisper, the question down the alley, and the question, and Johnny Shreve asked you this: what lift that you do currently, or that you've done the most of, that you basically are like, I don't really need to do this at all. It's sort of worthless.
Huh. So, okay. So if we're generally talking about like a protocol, it's God, I hate to say this. It's probably going to be like foam rolling shit, because there was a long time where I was like riddled with inflammation and I had all these overuse issues, almost entirely due to PED use. I'm just like super, super prone to that shit. But when I was desperate to like feel good, I would put off warm ups and I try to foam roll and try to stretch and do all the Kelly Starrett mobility shit. That all in all, it maybe psychologically prepared me, but I don't think it actually did any tangible bit of good. And it wasn't until I just got off PEDs that all of that fixed itself. And I think most people, it's long since been the case, I think, for most people that really emphasize that shit. People in the space know. They're like, it's a waste of time. Like, go get the barbell, do a couple light sets, add a little weight, do a couple light reps, and then just work up to your top set. That tends to be enough for everybody. If I were to pin it down to an exercise, that's kind of hard because I'm kind of a barbell minimalist. Like my best runs have been with a lot of volume and a lot of different exercises, but it always revolves around like the staple barbell lifts. Squatting, deadlifting variations, overhead pressing, benching, and rowing. That's most of it. And I wouldn't remove any of those, certainly. So I really can't think of anything off the top of my head that I spent a lot of time doing. Usually if I do something and I don't think it's doing anything, it's gone immediately. And I've had those, I gave my hand at speed work and I'm like, this is useless for strength. There's other gimmicky exercise I think I've come across, but there's nothing I've really dedicated a lot of time to.
What would be one thing that you see people doing regularly that you're like, yeah, that's fucking a waste of your time?
I feel like, I don't know why this pops into my head, because I could probably give an answer for like any body part. For some reason, I feel like glute bridges are just like the dumbest fucking exercise. Like I don't understand the appeal to it. I don't understand how that works better than a lunge or a squat or any type of hinge movement. I don't know. That's probably one. Like I feel like maniacs that just really like to squat and deadlift and do unilateral leg work with like a deep stretch are probably going to get bigger cakes than somebody who hammers fucking
glute
bridges. Yeah. But who knows? It's a tool, it's a tool. If it's on top of a bunch of other stuff, all right, whatever. But, I don't know. The only thing that really, really, I'm like, what is this? And this is just going into more cultish shit about lifting. It's these kids doing like isolation stuff with like foam rollers on their arms, where they're like, everything's cuffs and they're like attached to machines where they're misusing the machine for another muscle. I don't know if you've seen this on Instagram. You got to spend more time on reels. This is like the extension of the science-based training now for hypertrophy, because they think they have this mechanistic understanding of what causes hypertrophy, so they can bypass all the things that don't matter. So they're maximizing mechanical tension by finding the range where the muscle has the most internal leverage and then putting it under the greatest load without any other joints or structures getting in the way, and it leads them to do the most ridiculous, wacky shit. It's like a meme now, and you don't know if they're doing it to shitpost or rage bait, or if they actually believe this shit. But it must be some dedication for rage baiting, because there's guys that are posting twice a day for months on end about their dumbass hypertrophy training workouts that make no fucking sense.
I'll have to discover this.
I'll send you a couple of the worst offenders
Yeah.
so you can go over it.
100%. Okay, give
Yeah.
us now a question, a thought experiment for the audience and for the next specific guest.
All right. Do you believe that the current Mr. Olympia winners would be better if they were involving evidence-based training into their routines?
I have to write this whole thing. Do you believe the current Mr. Olympia would be better? So would they look better, be bigger if they used science-backed training?
Yes.
Anything specific of science-backed?
It's vague. It can mean so many different things. You could say if they emphasize the stretch more, because that's his pet thing. Do you believe the current Mr. Olympia would be more muscular if he involved more stretch-focused training?
Gosh, I'm trying to be the Switzerland of podcasting.
Why? Oh, that's boring. No. You can tell if it was me. I don't care. Say, hey, Bromley said you're ugly and you sound dumb.
Okay. So everybody can find you at all the YouTube channels. They can go to basestrength.com.
That's right.
Okay, basestrength.com. And then, dude, you still don't post it all on Instagram. That's lame.
It's such a time suck. I can't do anything on Instagram without it taking up like 3 hours. Like it takes so long to make a reel. The reel's going to get like no views. And then I'm going to be anxious over that. And then I end up scrolling through a bunch of other shit. I'm about to get rid of my smartphone, honestly.
All right. That works. All right. Alex, thanks for being on the podcast.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Peace.